part of ultra running. As we seek the buckles, the finish lines, and the crazy distances, we experience a lot of failure along the way too. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Michelle, and we're both ultra runners and ultra running coaches who want to know more about the dreaded DNF, how, when, and why they happen, but more importantly, how we learn, we move forward, and we get back up to run again.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Run That Again. We are here today with a special guest who had his own podcast, and he is starting a new podcast. So Michelle, we're just gonna go ahead and kick off because people know the spiel already. Go ahead and welcome our guest today.
Hello, everybody, and special welcome to Jeff Winchester, a good friend of ours. Jeff is joining us from the southeastern coast of North Carolina, where I understand it's very flat. Jeff is an ultra runner, a USCA certified ultra running coach, a race director, a podcast host, and like many other life roles. We're super excited to chat with you. We know Jeff, and do you know, like, I realized I've known you, Jeff, through the ultra running guys for like, it's been several years now.
I think it's been at least 3.
Yeah, because since probably early 2021. And as many folks know, if you are listeners of the Ultra Running Guys podcast, that show is recently wrapped up, but Jeff is transitioning to a brand new show where he is co-host with Steve Epifano called Blueprint to Ultra. So everybody go to your IG and your socials and follow Blueprint to Ultra. Stay tuned because they have an episode dropping on October 17th or 18th. The Friday, October 18th.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that.
Steve Epifano, who was our second or third guest, I think, on our show. So
we're just keeping it close to home for you guys.
We're just a nice little niche ultra running podcasting community here.
Definitely.
I have to share that I met Jeff, not knowing I met Jeff, but I listened to the ultra running guys, and I lived in North Carolina at the time, and I went to this race. It was the lottery, like the little lottery trail race. It was like a 3-hour timed run. And I didn't realize it was Jeff who handed me his phone and said, "Hey, can you take a picture of us real quick?" And I took a picture. And then later I'm on Instagram and I'm scrolling through and I see Ultra Running Guys and they share this picture. I'm like, I took that picture.
Well, the bad thing is I didn't know who to credit it to, so I apologize for that.
It's okay. I was just so excited. I was like, I didn't even realize I had met Jeff, because I'd been listening to the Ultra Running Guys podcast, but just didn't even put the pieces together that day. So, I mean, I knew we were both in North Carolina, but hadn't realized we'd cross paths that way. So
very cool.
Very,
very cool. Yeah, I don't remember the name of that race either. And that's bad because I love the race.
The lottery trail run or something like that. It was really random because it was like the more laps you did, the more entries you got to like a prize.
Yep.
It was a cash prize essentially.
Yeah, it was with Matt and Amanda Kearney of the race.
Yes.
Great people. I just can't remember the name of their race. And if they listen to this, they're going to probably be really mad at me. So I apologize, Matt and Amanda.
They put on great races, though.
They do.
They're a lot of fun.
That's a pretty clever format.
That's
and I'm sure there are a lot of folks that know, because Jeff, you volunteer at a lot of races too, right?
I volunteered at a few. The one that I like to volunteer the most at is probably the Cape Fear Badwater, which is part of Badwater Families Races. It's out here on Bald Head Island in North Carolina, and he's got a 50-mile race and a 50K race. I've run the 50K a couple times and volunteered probably 3 or 4 years of it as well. And he's actually about to have his first marathon out here in I think 3 weeks. He's going to host a marathon on the island as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, Chris Kosman's a great guy.
That is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Well, today, like I said, Jeff, you wear many, many hats. You have a lot of roles, but we really want to talk with you about like Jeff the runner,
Hmm.
like get your perspective. I think you've been part of teams and groups and different things, but it's really nice just to be able to chat with you because you like looking at your ultra sign up, you've got quite a race resume. Like you have a lot of running experience. How did you like personally what drew you into the world of ultra running?
I appreciate that. I don't think I have a really long resume compared to so many other people. I'm somewhat jealous of them when I kind of talk to folks who've been running probably a few years less than me, and I look at theirs and they're like they've done 10 times as many races as me. I'm like, how do you have the time, schedule, or bandwidth to pull that off? But I started running when I was 39 years old. I'm 52 now, and it was because of some health reasons. I wasn't ever overweight. I had what you would call a lot of skinny fat, still kind of do, but had basically high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, the acid reflux, and pre-diabetic. And so I had this internal combustible bomb, basically, of health issues. And so I was doing somewhat stressful work at the time, and one of my coworkers was a triathlete, and he said, you should probably start exercising or running or something like that. And so I said, well, I've never been athletic. I've never done any sports my entire life. Like that's not something I did. I was the basic book nerd, right? Avoided anything I could with athletics. So he talked me into doing it. And when I went out, I started to run like 1 to 2 miles. He's like, just go run just a couple miles at a time and just see how it goes. And so I would just like blitzkrieg it as hard as I could to the point that I feel like I was going to like die, right? Because I had no concept. Like you go run, you're like, you're just going to haul it. And I
I
thought I
think
was,
so many people think that.
yeah. And the problem is that I couldn't do it because all I wanted to do was like literally cough up a lung. It was just incredibly painful. And so I told him, I said, I don't think I can do this running thing. I can't get much more than like a mile without feeling like I want to pass out. He's like,
Right?
well, what, like, how fast do you run? I said, I have no clue. I don't have a watch. I don't do anything like that. I'm just going for a run because you told me to. And his wife is also a triathlete, and they had a heart rate strap or whatever. He said, well, why don't you wear that? And so I put that on and came to realize that my heart rate was really, really high. It was capping out like 212 to 215, which is high. Now, in hindsight, that is really high, but what I've learned since then is I do have a normally higher heart rate, but not that high. Like that's still really, really bad.
No, I'm the same way. My heart rate is just,
yeah.
I don't have the heart rate of a runner. Like I just don't. Like it's never been the really low heart rate. Mine's just always on the higher side.
Interesting. Yeah. Another good point for folks to know your normal, like know your baseline.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I could go into a tangent on this too. One of the things I tell other runners either that I coach or just from my own personal experience is that, yes, you can go online and get the normal heart rate, that you're supposed to have when you're running. Like, what is it supposed to be for the different ranges? That's all available online, but I highly recommend that you don't follow that. Instead, you get a personal heart rate test. You can get a lactate threshold heart rate test. You can do it at a lab or whatever it is. I've had that done to find out what my normal heart rate should be when I'm running at different endurance levels. And so that's just come over time that I decided I really wanted to kind of get a better perspective of what was going on with my heart rate compared to what my effort level looked like. And so I encourage people, if they want to train by heart rate, fine, but don't do it because what Google told you. Do it because what a lab has told you, and get what your personal heart rate ranges should be. Otherwise, you may not be training appropriately for yourself. And so shift that to the side. Back to the context of the story, right?
It's an important note.
Well, it is because with athletes I coach, I work on just RPE, like rate of perceived effort. And I think that's a better metric for people to learn how to run at different engine levels, if you will, of effort. And I teach them how to do that because I think that's the appropriate way to go. But so when he realized my heart rate was going so high, he said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the Google normal, right? And figure out a heart rate target for you. And you're going to, whenever you get to this number on your watch, because he, convinced me to buy a Garmin watch at the time that could read it. Once you get to this rate on your watch, I want you to slow down or walk. And so I realized I could only run like 1/10 of a mile max. And so what became like this idea of just running as hard as I could shifted all the way down to this trying to just jog as slow as I possibly could and then walk as much as I possibly could and keep trying to get my heart rate back down. And so it took me months of this thing I call jogging, and it's this idea of jogging and walking. It's this combination thing. We now call it run walking, in our ultra vernacular, but back then I had never heard of run walk. I coined it as jogging. And so
which is brilliant.
Well, I mean, it's just a term, right? So
I love it.
So jogging, this run walk, is with nothing other than just trying to go based off of what the heart rate was looking like. I did that for months, and then eventually I got to where I could start running an actual mile. And eventually I started training for like a 5K and 10K and all these different types of races. And probably around 2015, which was 9 years ago, at this point, I wanted to run a marathon. I don't know why. I just decided that was going to be the next step. And so in December of 2015, I went for my first marathon. The goal was to be 4 hours. I hit a wall at mile 20 or 19 or 20, and I came in at 4:10. And I was just furious. I was so mad at that. And because of that, I went to try to find the next available race. Well, there was a 50K that was taking place local to us the following month. And so I signed up for that. It was a trail run. I knew a lot of the runners because it was a big community around here. And I thought, well, I'll just go do that. I'd been doing some Spartan races, so I knew some people through the Spartan community as well that were going to be there. Went and did that race, and it was miserably good. It was just an absolute sufferfest, but I loved it. And it was one of those things I thought, I never thought I was going to like that. I did this because I was mad about the marathon. I'm still going to go back and run a marathon. And so in March of 2015, I ran a marathon with the goal of going sub 4. I did by like 10 minutes or whatever it was. And so I was super stoked with that. But I did not experience the same type of happiness or joy, if you will, that I did when I finished the 50K. And so it was weird because, the 50K took me over 2 hours longer than that marathon.
Yeah.
But there was something about that experience, about the community, about the people that I gravitated to, and I wanted to get more of it. And so I eventually I think I did a 50 miler in November, the JFK 50 that same year. Finished it, got hooked up to an IV at the end of it. It was fantastically struggle fest. But again, it's regardless of the pain, it was something that it struck a place in me where let me say it this way. My why has always been I never thought I could do something like this because I've never been athletic. It's the idea that I don't think I can. And I still struggle with that. Even when I line up for any kind of race of any kind of distance, is this self-defeating belief that I cannot get it done. I cannot do it, even though I have done it. And so I always battle that. And then so to accomplish these for me is this huge personal victory that kind of just probably resonates all the way back to when I was a kid, but I didn't feel like I could accomplish certain tasks like this. And so the ultra running community has given me that. And I mean, I still screw up. I still, make bad mistakes. I still DNF. I've done my share of those types of poor performances, but I've also had really good successes and been able to coach some folks who've had success. And to see all of that has been probably one of the most rewarding things that I could be a part of. There's your long answer. Sorry about that.
There is so much in that. I love it though. It's interesting, as you were saying, that first marathon that you ran and you missed your 4-hour goal by 10 minutes. And your response to that was, dang it, what else can I do? You jumped right into not just another marathon, but a 50K, which is longer and more challenging. And then just kept going back. So it's interesting. And I think that mindset, it says a lot about your determination. At the same time, I definitely understand. I think that self-doubt that you're talking about is something that's so every runner I know has experienced at some point, some more than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can experience that on a training run. I remember, with one of my first coaches I had, because not only do I coach people, I believe that you should also get coached. Let me say that differently. Not everybody needs a coach. Not everybody should have a coach. But if you want to have a coach, right, I think that's a good thing. As a coach, I believe I'm not just going to coach people. I need to be coached. So that's my philosophy behind that. So the reason I have a coach, or that's one of the main reasons I still have a coach. But early on, one of my coaches was doing speed work with me. And I remember struggling so bad in speed work, thinking, I am so freaking old. Why am I out here in this neighborhood pushing so hard, right? Nobody else is doing this, And so I just think there's this issue where we don't know what we can do, right? Unless we begin to challenge ourselves and push ourselves and get out of this comfort zone. And so when we sign up for a coach, we sign up for a race that we've never done, we should allow that experience to be something that challenges us and not always rest back in what's the most comfortable for us. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I think it's sort of human. We all get kind of complacent and comfortable, and I think humans tend to struggle with uncertainty a lot. It's kind of a foundational human thing, and it can really trip folks up sometimes. And I think that's why we lean towards what's predictable, what's familiar, because when you step onto a start line or when you try something new for the first time, there is tremendous uncertainty, and it's really unsettling. And I think it just sounds like you've recognized, like so many of us, how much that can benefit us.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean,
to like face that.
yeah, I think we fall into a trap sometimes where we are overconfident, if you will. The more I've done a few ultras, you both have done ultras, right? Michelle, you've done, I think, even a ton more than I've done, to be honest with you. Right? But if you line up at any ultra race with the idea that it's going to be easy, you're probably going to fail. And if you don't fail, you're going to suffer really bad because you've gone in with the wrong mindset. Is that
the Hydra?
Right. Well, it could be anything like this, because you go into an event.
That was me at the Hydra.
Right. Like, it's just going to be an easy thing to do. Right. And it's not. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
we should never take a race for granted. So I don't, when I'm talking to folks, they're like, you go run really long distances, Jeff. I said, yeah, but I still find the first mile to be really challenging.
Yeah.
And it's okay to acknowledge that as an ultra runner.
Yeah.
And so if we underestimate the distances, if we underestimate the races, we're setting ourselves up for a very difficult experience. And it doesn't mean we're not going to maybe do well or whatever it is, but that experience is probably not being approached with the right healthy mindset to accomplish the goal that we probably have for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we sat down to record today, we sent a few questions. We have this little pre-show questionnaire that we like to send out, and in response to one of the questions, Jeff, you wrote about one of your best ultra running experiences was at Umstead 100 when you went sub 24 for the first time. Not the first time you ran Umstead. It wasn't your first 100. It was the first time you went sub 24 in your finish. And I loved what you wrote, and I wondered if you would talk about, because it's this mindset. It's this, you said something like attitude is key, or attitude is everything. And you think that the reason that you had such success on that day was you totally went in with probably a healthy respect, but no expectations. Like, you went in sort of relaxed. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, because it's such a weird fine line. Like, you want to respect the distance and acknowledge and not expect it to be easy, but at the same time, you don't want to get so uptight about it and so restricted in how you think it's going to go that you screw yourself up. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. It is probably the best experience I've ever had at an ultra, by far. And it's actually tied to a DNF, and right now, for some reason, that DNF race escapes me. But I remember DNFing the race going into that, or one of the hundreds beforehand, because I was getting so caught up in a goal time and what that time needed to be, and that everybody says you have your A goal, your B goal, your C goal, or all the way to Z if you have to have it, right? And that A goal tends to be the driver, and we have our charts. We have these either pace charts, we have time stamps, whatever those loops are going to be, or laps are going to be, or mile markers, whatever the race structure is. And everyone who's training for an ultra does that. And we have this idea of what we think we should do and how we think we should perform based on how our training is going. Because, we go on a run on a 10-minute, we go run a 10-mile run, and our pace at that It's, I don't know, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever the number is. And then we go to our race and we think, oh, well, let's just extrapolate. If I can maintain that pace during this race, here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, we think we can just multiply it.
Yeah, right. It's stupid, but we do. And there's some fairness to it. Like, yes, it is possible. If you're an elite runner, apologies, right? You probably can do this really well. I'm not as good at that. But the point is, I had such a goal mindset for the DNF race that when I started slipping, the entire race became horrible, and I ended up DNFing because it just felt like it's such a failure. Like, oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to get to this next point, and just continue to ratchet down mentally. So I remember coming off that race, and so my bucket list race is Western States. No matter what, I want to somehow get into Western States one day. And I think I've got like 5 years worth of tickets or whatever after this race coming up this upcoming weekend. I should have 5 years. And I was going into that Umstead you're referring to, and I decided that I'm going to have an A goal, B goal, and C goal, but my A goal is 30 hours, which was the cutoff. Like, you have to finish in 30 hours. And so the entire race, I focused on finishing in 30 hours. That entire time.
So you kind of just flip-flopped it.
I flipped my entire goals down. And what I said by that, and my wife and my son were there, my youngest son, they were crewing me. So Umstead is a race here in Raleigh. It's got 8 loops that are 12.5 miles, and they have 1,000 feet of gain per loop. So it's not a lot of elevation. It's just a bunch of rolling hills. And so you can't really build a solid run walk strategy like where it's repetitive. You basically run the inclines and you walk the inclines and you run the rest of it if you can for as long as possible. And so because I had this mindset, I'm just going to go have fun. I'm just going to get it done in 30 hours. I know I can finish this in 30 hours. We're just going to have a great time. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to talk to people on the laps and the loops and everything. We're going to, it's a local race for me. It's like 2 hours away from my house. A lot of people know me there. I'm just going to have fun. Like, I'm just going to have fun. I'm not going to worry about time at all, except for 30 hours. The goal is to finish, and I had the B's and C's and stuff. And so I print all these out. So my wife and my son, they can keep an idea how things are going. And they're going to tell me if I'm behind my 30-hour goal, right? Never was an issue. And I came through every lap with the intent that I wasn't going to worry about the time. And so I never asked about how time was going. I mean, I had my watch on, so I had a rough idea. I'm not like stupid. And I had a clue. But even if I did well, I immediately took that thought and just knocked it out and said, well, that's great and all, because I'm definitely going to get my 30 hours and to ignore the rest of it. And so I did it every lap. And I got to lap 7. I finished lap 7, and I looked at my watch and I thought, oh my God, like I could get like my goal of getting a 24-hour finish. And I thought, are you going to believe that that's possible? Like, in that moment, I made the conscious decision. Are you now going to believe that's possible? Because on the other laps, like after lap 6, I started thinking about it. It's like, we're not worrying about that. We're not going to think about it. So lap 7, I finished. I thought, okay, it's now within the realm of possibility. You're going to finish in 30 hours. You should probably try and go for this because you've never been able to get sub 24. So I left the aid station. My wife and son didn't say a word about it. They knew that I was on point for it. And so I came back through, and I had, so the way it stops is you come back through before you finish the lap, you meet your crew, and it's like another 1/10 of a mile before you get to the finish. And so I got there, and my wife and son are like, you're sub 24, like you're going to finish this. And so I stopped and I started talking to them. And they said, no, go. I was like, it's a 1/10 of a mile. I've got like 20 something minutes. So I ended up talking for like 5 minutes, whatever it was. And I ended up finishing. And because I didn't care, because I cared, like I really was excited about it, but I was just happy that I got it by not focusing on it. And so I wanted to like celebrate with them a little bit. And so, hugged my wife, hugged my son, and then went ahead and finished and came back and we talked a little bit more. And so I told them, I said, I want to first off tell you thank you for not talking about my time on any lap. And they said, we started at lap 5 thinking he's going to get sub 24. and I said, oh, I'm sure you did. And they go, but we just knew
quietly nudging each other.
They're like, but we can't say anything to him. And I said, that was the best decision you made because I wanted to not have it in my head. And so what I learned from that experience is that, I love ultra running and I love the races, and that if I can remove the pressure of time, odds are I'll finish before the entire event's over. So, but if I can remove this personal expectation that I got to perform to some level to impress myself or someone else, right? Because
Right.
sub 24 begins to be this arbitrary goal that a lot of runners have, like a sub 4-hour marathon, a sub 6-hour 50K, a sub 12-hour, 11-hour 50-mile. Like those tend to be these benchmark accomplishments, and yet if we can remove that pressure, we can actually get them because they are doable.
Yeah.
But they're not doable when we start to struggle and we think we can't make it happen because we allow that negative thought to come in that then gets in the way of us actually being able to do something we never dreamed was possible. And it can happen. But that was my best phrase.
You spend so much time like doing math in your head when you're like focused on the time, when you're stressed about the time. Like I know that's happened to me and it's been my downfall multiple times where I just am like calculating. I'm looking at my watch going, okay, I've got this amount of time to get to this point, and then I've got to do this amount, I have to keep this average pace, from there to there. And then that just eats up so much of my energy, like trying to think through that. And so I can totally relate to that. And I love the idea. I haven't mastered it yet of like letting go of that like pressure of time.
Yeah, I mean, so my goal is to finish.
Yeah.
I still do the charts. I've got the Canal Quarter coming up this weekend. I don't know when this is being released. So October 12th is the date. I was supposed to run the Yeti. It got canceled because of that. I signed up for the Canal Quarter.
Yeah.
I have one goal. I'm going without a crew. I have nobody there to support me. So it's going to be a first-time experience. But I literally have to finish so I can get me a Western States ticket. And so mentally, I'm beginning to try to prepare for what that experience is going to be like solo, and also just with a 30-hour finish, and let the chips fall as they may.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I'm going to approach it. And do I expect it to be difficult? 100%. Do I expect to get in my head a lot because I'm solo and using that as all the excuses in the world? 100%. Like I'm not immune to the idea I'm going to struggle with those things. Can I go sub 24? Sure. Is that the focus? No.
Nope.
Because if I blow up, I mean, because when I'm saying sub 24, I'm talking about just barely sub 24. I'm not like rattling down to a 20-hour 100-mile. I'm not doing anything like that. And so if I try to push hard, I'm literally pushing at my limit for sub 24. So it's got to be a perfect race. Like the experience has to work all together for me.
Yeah.
Just with my skill that I don't have.
And it's interesting to think about, like sometimes, like the whole sub 24, Jeff, like you said, it's, it's something that we all have as this, but it's like so friggin' arbitrary. I mean, what, it doesn't really make it better. Like nobody's better because they did something, it's sub 24 versus not.
Unless you get a special buckle or something.
Which they do have at some races.
I know.
But your friends and everybody you're not, even the people that they're going to be like, congratulations. I mean,
yes.
Right. Nobody's going to be like, wait, did you get this special buckle?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, it's, so in your experience, like you've had a variety of different types of races, different experiences. You've had races you didn't finish. You've had races that went really well, others that were not as expected. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of what you've learned in those moments? You mentioned like when the thought popped into your head and you kicked it out. When you started thinking about like the time and you just dismissed it, like what helps you in the moment? Is there anything that helps you to kind of get out of your head and let go of spiraling down that thought trail?
So yes, and also I will confess that's really hard to do. When you start the spiral, we do pretend to tell people a lot. Oh, just shake it off. You can get out of it. Give yourself time. It'll go away. Eat something, right?
Yeah.
It'll get better. Like all that is true, but it's hard to do in the moment. The thing that I have learned to do best is, and it's because of on the ultrarunning guys podcast that like you said earlier that we just wrapped up, there was a guest that we had. His name was Russ Leaptrot. He was one of our earliest guests that we had. I met him at a race that was held here in Wilmington, the Southern Tour. I talked about a few minutes ago. He was doing the backyard, but he came on our show and we talked to him for a while and we asked him about running. Like, what do you do? How do you maintain it in a backyard without like just completely falling apart or just wanting to quit? He said, I just focus on the experience or something to that degree. He begins to think about everything else around him. He takes in his entire environment and he begins to try to appreciate the environment. Michelle, you do this on your runs when you go out. You like, seen on my run, I think is how you hashtag it.
Yep.
And so it's this idea of, do we take it for granted that we're outside being able to experience this? Because a lot of us are sitting at, at jobs on a computer, or we're in some sort of, store doing some sort of retail or whatever it is. But we have these jobs where we're just kind of like going through the motions of life a lot of ways. When we're out doing an ultra, if we could just take a moment, and when I say a moment, 100 miles worth of moments, right? And just see everything around you and appreciate the fact you're on your feet and your feet are going to carry you for 100 freaking miles. I don't care if it's 1 mile loops, but for 100 miles, your feet can take you to places that you never thought were possible. And you begin to just start looking at the things, the trees. He would talk about that he would focus on just the different sounds that he could hear. And that if you can begin to think of things externally to you, then you're not going to pay attention to all the internal pain, because that internal spiral is that spiral is internal, right? We're only seeing ourselves in that moment, and we're not seeing everything else around us. Here's what we're seeing. We're seeing another runner when they come by, and we're mad at them because they look like they're feeling better than we are.
Yeah, we get in that whole trip.
Right.
Yeah.
Odds are they are hating their lives at that moment too. And if not, it'll be coming. But if we could just appreciate everything that we're a part of and external to what we're feeling and try to experience externally, it changes everything, because you're no longer noticing yourself in your own brain.
100%. That is so interesting, because that's one of my personal number one strategies when I start, even in a long, just any long run or in a race, when I start getting in that headspace of like, oh my God, I am so slow. This is taking so long. They're probably like, whatever, all the thoughts, all that stuff. The number one thing for me is to connect with my external, like my senses.
Mm-hmm.
The sights around me, the smells around me. It's like focus on the smell of the crisp leaves, looking at the different colors. I think you said the sounds, like what do you hear in the environment around you, and all of those things. And then I can sort of tap into a visual of like an energy connection with everything external. And it's incredibly powerful. And then I'm able to like lower my shoulders and
that's a therapy technique to something you can see, something you can taste, something you can feel like tactically, something you can hear, something you can smell, like bringing yourself to those five senses. So, that's useful just when you're in a stressful situation, in life, let alone on the trail, to get yourself out of that headspace.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I do is if I can't do the experiential thing, right, is I then have the conversation with myself, right? And that conversation typically will go around first getting the negative thought is like, I told you you couldn't do things. This is exactly why you're having this problem, right? I have to kick that one to the curb. But the other one is, and let me say it this way. I've talked about this ad nauseum, I think, in other places. I've spoken on other podcasts as well, or even on my own, is that we all sign up for an ultra with the understanding that it is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
If you were to ask any ultra runner, do you think this is going to be hard? Their answer to that question is yes. Do you think it's going to hurt? Their answer is going to be yes. And so if they can acknowledge that fact, then let's flip it. Then when it starts to hurt, why are you so surprised?
Yeah.
Like why are we surprised by our suffering? Why are we surprised when it's difficult? And the reason that we are is because it happened earlier than we thought it should. It's happening at mile 15 when we thought it was going to happen at mile 60.
Yeah.
Well, it happened at mile 15, so don't be surprised. It just happened, right? And we have to recognize the fact this isn't a surprise. So we have to stop behaving like it is.
That is so good.
Because
I had completely forgotten, Jeff, you have a fantastic blog post about this.
Yes, I used to. I think it's on my new website, whatever.
Okay. Yeah, and I had totally forgotten that, and I love that perspective. Like, we act like, why are we acting like we're surprised when this is a given? And it's more of, the more that we can accept, the more we stop trying to fight the circumstances. And I think that's so much of these big endurance endeavors and these big races and going these really long distances really does involve so much acceptance. And not trying to force the situation.
Yeah, and I think when you can accept that fact, then you can start identifying solutions. Like if you're going to fight the fact it's happening, this sucks, this is difficult, I want to quit, this is miserable. If you want to dance in that muck for a while, you can. But if you've gone ahead and accepted the fact it's going to be hard, and now now it is hard, so I recognize it, I'm no longer going to be surprised by that. Well, then what are the solutions for this type of hard that I'm dealing with? And
right.
we can go ahead and begin to execute on those things because we've accepted that emotion. It's okay to have the emotions. And I think a lot of people try to avoid those. I think we should be okay with the fact it hurts and we're upset and we're sad or whatever, or we're mad, whatever it is. We accept that emotion, but then we process it and we don't necessarily give it life. We now solve it. We're like, okay, I felt that. This is how it feels. I didn't really want to happen this right now. I am a little upset about this. Now what I'm going to do about it. So yeah. That's just how I approach those things.
Absolutely.
At least now.
Yeah.
and I may still DNF another race. So let's not pretend because you never know when it strikes.
So talk to us a little bit about the DNFs that you've had and the differences in, I always find this interesting, the differences in the moments when you are able to push those thoughts aside and keep going. Somehow you find that power inside you to do that versus the days that somehow you can't find that same, because I've experienced that. I've experienced the power to just keep going even when it looks like I'm not going to make cutoffs or I might be finishing the race after, it's officially over or something. Like I've somehow found that ability to power through. And then there's been times where I have plenty of time and I still can't find that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, different people's perspectives on those, someone who's had a lot of finishes and, some DNFs.
A lot of DNFs, so you can say that, it's fair.
I have a lot of DNFs, so I can't,
I think we succeed and we DNF because we pivot on emotions and we pivot on our attitude. I think if you take any scenario where you DNF, most people quit that race before they get to the quitting spot. In other words, if I'm going to DNF a race, I will have already decided to DNF before I get to the aid station where I'm allowed to quit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. Here's the crazy thing. You could be 10 miles between aid stations, and mile 4 after leaving the aid station, you've got 6 miles to go. You're deciding you're going to quit. In the next 6 miles, you're spending that convincing yourself why it's okay for you to quit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But here's what's insane. We've convinced ourselves for 6 miles that we need to quit, but yet we just went 6 miles.
Right. Yeah. No, I can completely.
Which means physically, even though it hurts, we can, but we're pivoting on attitude.
Yeah.
Like we've decided, we've made a conscious decision that this isn't fun anymore. I can't do this anymore. Whatever it is, we have given in to that, even though, again, injuries are a whole nother conversation. Like I've been injured one or two, so eliminating injury DNFs. Right. Frustration DNFs, all those types of things are conscious decisions to quit before we get there. And we make that decision to stop for whatever attitude pivot that we have had in that moment that says, this is why I need to be done. And we're no longer having fun. And it's no longer what we want to do. And we've lost sight of the experience around us. And we're just done. I look at DNFs, though, after the fact, and I'm okay with them. I don't want to accept them, but I'm okay with them. And what I mean by that is I call them, I've renamed them in my own brain to do not forget is what DNF stands for. And it's this idea that I'm going to,
I like that.
Thank you. If I DNF, right, is that what can I take home from it? What can I take out of it? And that's where I started learning other things like, you should probably work on elevation. If you can't climb, then you've got to stop using that as an excuse, because in the race you're quitting because it hurts and you're telling yourself, this, I cannot do this anymore. If you're DNFing because you've got family that has convinced you to quit, then you need to figure out how you're going to coach them so that they don't say it's okay to stop, right? There's things that you want to look at that have created the circumstances around your DNF so that you can change those in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true. I think, just on what you said, I've never really thought about it that way. But yeah, you never go into an aid station, and then all of a sudden at the aid station say, you know what, I think I'm done. You've made the decision. You've made the decision long before you got there. And that's always the case for me. I find I've just had a crew talk with my crew and pacers for my 100-miler coming up. And I said, no one's allowed to give me any slight bit of permission to quit, because all I need is somebody validating my decision to make it okay in my head. And I know, because I've been in that space before where I've been like, okay, I think I'm going to quit. And I talk to somebody and they're like, well, if you really think it's time to quit, then maybe it's time. I was like, you guys can't, nobody's allowed to give me that, even the slightest inkling of permission.
Right.
You're allowed.
But you would have already decided.
Yeah. Yes. But if I have people telling me not to do it, because I have been in a situation before where I've come into an aid station pretty determined to quit, and the aid station volunteers have said, no, you've got time, keep going. And so I'm like, okay, just make it to the next aid station. Now,
That's
whether
great.
or not I quit at that next aid station is another story. But I've noticed, for me, it's somebody validating my decision that like affirms it in my mind as, okay, it's okay to quit. It's okay to stop now. And so that was my biggest request to my crew, because I was just like, no one's allowed to. That's the biggest thing I ask of you. Unless I come into the aid station with like a bone sticking out of my leg, I am not, you're not allowed to tell me it's okay to quit.
So one of the pieces of advice that I give to myself now and also give to others is if we know that that's true, right, that we tend to make the decision beforehand, then you've got to personally open yourself up to be willing to listen to either an aid station volunteer or a crew, if you have them, when you come into that aid station, because we've already started closing our mind getting into that point. And so if you can posture yourself to say, I'm going to have an open mind, I'm going to go into every aid station, even though I feel like garbage, even though I've made a decision to quit, I'm going to at least go in and just kind of get their take. Like, go ahead and start selling your brain on the idea you're going to be open to feedback at an aid station. The other thing to do is, if you have a crew, you should plan for your aid station. And what I mean by that is not do your list of here are the things I want you to do when I show up at the aid station, but more than likely, with all the technology we have, they're going to be tracking you and they're going to be saying, oh, you're about a mile, 2 miles out. Have them contact you, right? And say, hey, when you're coming in, what are the things you want? Not, are you planning on quitting when you come in? No. What are the things you want so that when you get here, we can help get you in and out a lot easier and smoother? And because you know that when you're going to the aid station, you're thinking, hey, I need to make sure I change my shoes, or I take care of this blister, or I get some chafing stuff or whatever it is. And then we leave that aid station having forgotten that, right?
Yeah.
So what if, as you're coming in,
you forget everything else?
Everything. So if you're coming in about 2 miles out, when we start thinking about all the stuff we want to do at that aid station, have your crew contact you and say, hey, what's the list of things that are in your mind that you want? Cool. Send them, tell us. Or, because we're all carrying our phones anyway, go ahead and text it to them. Like, go ahead and text them. Or you can even say, I'm in a low spot. I am in a low spot. Here's what's going on. I'm thinking I want to be done. I just want you to be aware I'm in a low spot. While you're making that process decision to quit, go ahead and tell somebody you're thinking about it. Why not?
Yeah.
Like, get them involved before you show up with all that drama you're about to bring into the aid station. If you can.
Right.
But like, so for the Now Quarter, I'm not going to have a crew. It's going to be the first time without that, right? So I won't be able to have this pre-aid station discussion with anybody. My plan is to go in with the mindset to listen to the aid station volunteers. Most aid station volunteers at ultras are experienced ultra runners. We know this.
Yes.
So why don't we listen to them? Because they're thinking a heck of a lot more clearly than we are in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's my plan.
I love that. And I was thinking, we come into aid stations We're open to getting snacks. We're open to food. We're open, and it's kind of like open mind, open mouth. Give me the foods. Let me listen. But I really, really like that, and it's so simple. Just open mind. Just keep an open mind. I really, really that might be a mantra I throw into play.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are some other techniques you may consider for the upcoming race? Like when I ran the C&O Canal 100 in April and didn't have a crew or pacers. And so one of the things that I did was I put notes in my drop bag. There were like 2 aid stations where you could access a drop bag. And I had a note in there and I had a little bulleted, like, get XYZ, for like mile 63 and maybe something else, like some other mindset, reminder for myself. Like, I wonder if that's something that.
No, I'm definitely doing that. At each of the drop back locations, I'm going to have a drop bag with just individual Ziploc bag inside of it with a note card that's going to have all the contents that I'm supposed to do, right? It's going to have instructions, but it's also with the plan that I'm going to take that entire Ziploc bag and throw it in my pack if I have to, just to make sure I don't forget anything that while I was intelligently thinking that I may need, I have now brought with me. Anything that I'm not sure that I'm going to have available to me at an aid station or at a drop bag, because maybe I'll need it beforehand, is going to ride in my pack the entire time.
Yep.
Because oftentimes we want to guess when we think we're going to need a headlamp. I'm not sure if I'm really wanting to risk that.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for things that I feel like I'm going to have at some point, I don't want to risk waiting till a drop bag for some of those things. Now, I'm also not going to be a pack mule and carry everything I possibly have either, because I think that's a bad strategy of just too much extra weight. But I will have a note card with instructions of what I want to do at that aid station, what I want to take care of, or at least consider taking care of. And I will also have a Ziploc bag that I will jump the entire thing in my pack when I go. Mantras or something like that, I really don't have. I will have a mantra by the time it gets there, but it always just depends on how I feel that day. And so that morning, I will either, write it on my hand, like on the palm, sometimes right on the palm, or I will have it in the note cards themselves. But I don't decide them like in advance. It just depends on how I'm feeling that day. It's probably going to be something that may just be the word finish. It may be something as simple as that, as a reminder, of what I'm doing. Or it could be, hey, take a look around today, or celebrate a volunteer as you're walking out today, whatever it wants to be, which I try to do anyway at most aid stations, because I think volunteers are just incredible human beings as a race director, that they're there. But so those types of things I plan to do.
Yeah, I really like that. And I feel the same about mantras. I try to sort of set an intention for any given race, and I might have a couple mantras in mind, but it always changes. It, even during the course of a race.
Yeah.
But I wonder, even like, some little, like, short little prompts for yourself, like, oh, what color are the trees? Like, like one of those, like, what, what do I hear? Like,
you could, a good prompt that I often say is like, look around.
Yeah.
Look around.
Yeah.
Just like that, because it could be look at the people around you. You could look. I mean, because we're going to be running from Akron to Cleveland for this time, and so I've never run at night. I've never been to Cleveland other than flying into it, right? So to be able to run into Cleveland is going to be kind of cool at night, and then turn around and head back to Akron and going through the national park. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be 2 different experiences. One through the national park itself, it's going to be very wooded, and then we're going to be in downtown Cleveland, heading all the way to the waterfront and coming back. And so just completely different environments.
Super cool.
So it's going to be something to that effect of just paying attention to it all. And the more that I can do that, and the more I can disengage from the effort, but to engage in the experience, it'll make the race go by a lot easier.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a fact.
Absolutely.
It's hard to say it, but it is true. So I plan to do a run walk for most of it. I've got different versions of that I've been practicing, different run intervals and walk intervals. And even on that, I'm going to ignore what my watch is telling me and kind of just move and see how it goes. And just kind of keep clicking around.
Yeah. I think that's excellent.
Thank you.
How was the shift in plans, how has that affected you mentally going to this race? Because you were signed up for Yeti 100. The race got moved. You thought you were still going to have it, and then it got canceled for very good reason. However, then you kind of had to deal with the disappointment of being trained and ready to go, and that race canceling, and now shifting to a very different race. And kind of how's that been for you?
That's a really good question. Very, very appropriate question, I think, for what has gone on. It was hard. And so there's a lot of emotions that go into it, right? And the reason that there were so many emotions, as I said earlier, is that my goal is to get into Western States. I need a qualifier this year, and Yeti was going to be my qualifier. I intentionally just avoided a qualifying race at the beginning of the year. I just want to spend a different front end of my year, and everything was focused on Yeti. And so when the experience of it getting delayed for a day and then eventually canceled, I kept thinking, okay, you're in this weird situation of angst, because we were staying in a VRBO up against a river in Damascus, and we actually had to evacuate ourselves because, like, it's real. Like, the flooding was insane in that area.
Yeah.
Nothing just as bad as in Western North Carolina. Western North Carolina, I think, actually got destroyed even worse. But worse is relative here because they were all destroyed. Like, the families and homes were just impacted. And the problem is, emotionally, I'm frustrated. And I'm depressed for myself and thinking, you sound like a selfish jerk.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I mean, to you're a selfish jerk.
but it does, because
I can relate to that though. Like,
you feel like you can't be empathetic, right? And so even my first post, I remember thinking, I need to figure out like what I want to say here, because I don't know why I need to feel like I need to say something. You know, you train for the Yeti, and yet you're in this such situation of angst for this community that you've been a part of, and you literally saw the homes around you getting flooded. Like, this is not great. Like, it's really bad. And are you going to come across sounding like a jerk because, you know, you were excited about running Yeti, which is a fantastic race. I highly recommend it. And so, you know, once they made a decision to cancel it, I was mad, not at them and not at the community, nothing like that. I was just mad at the situation I found myself in. And I thought, okay, don't freak. And so I went ahead and signed up that night. That Saturday he made the decision.
Wow.
I signed up for Canal Quarter because I've run that race before, and I knew it was 2 weeks later, and I knew that my wife probably wasn't going to be able to go. I was thinking, I'm just going to have to drop some money to make this happen, but I'm just going to go because it's what I want to do. And the problem is I had tapered for Yeti, and I tapered for like 3 weeks, and I missed a couple runs, and then I was going to have to go right into another race 2 weeks later. So that's a 5-week taper, and as a coach, that's bad.
Yeah,
that's a lot
not
of taper.
Ideal.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went out for a run on Sunday after we got back home. That we traveled all day Saturday, got home Sunday, and I went for I tried to run. I think it was like 14 or 16 miles that Sunday, and it was awful. And I struggled the entire time. And I thought, there's no way I could have run Yeti if it had been yesterday. Like, literally, there was no way because of how bad it formed. My coach, great man, he told me it's because emotionally you're in the wrong space, and you've been traveling, you've all this other stuff, but. So I've been training for the last week and a half, back to running, you know, double-digit miles for a few days, and I'm feeling pretty good going into it. I feel like I've reset and recalibrated enough. I'm going to start pseudo tapering again this upcoming week, and so I mean I did 14 yesterday and 10 today, and I will taper it back down a little bit more, and we'll kind of go from there. But since I'm doing a run walk, I should be able to survive that. But it is not ideal, and it's definitely not ideal situation. So we'll see. But emotionally, it was tough.
I totally understand that. Especially because for, you know, like Western, this is all tied to your big dream race,
your big
Western
goal.
States,
right?
And getting the qualifier. It's not just like that you were trained and ready to go, getting the qualifier, wanting to stay connected to that big goal, and then having to shift and pivot. And it sounds like you had like this sort of like guilt at feeling really awful about it because of, in the grand scheme of life, like there's utter devastation from
silly.
That storm.
What I'm talking about is silly.
But it doesn't, but it's like, But it's
we
still
need to allow
understandable.
space for ourselves to feel disappointment and emotions. Even
Yeah.
if it seems trivial in the scheme of things, it's still
Right.
real feelings that we have. Like, and
Yeah.
so I knew lots of people who were supposed to run Yeti, and that seemed to be the resounding, feelings is like, man, this sucks. I really wanted to do this, but also, can I really even complain about it? Because it's really not that big of a deal.
Right.
In the scheme of things, but it's like, but it is a big deal because that's still a like really disappointment. And I mean, I know somebody else who was staying in Damascus, just seeing everything unfold, I think took a huge emotional toll on you guys too. Like,
it was rough.
That's scary, and that's devastating to see that go down.
Yeah, we were having breakfast in Damascus at a diner, the Damascus diner. I don't remember the name of it.
Like the only diner. And
that's where Kayla was. Kayla Fitzgerald. She said she was there too, and like they were there when the power went out.
That's when I was there. I was about to tell the exact same story. That means I don't know who this is.
Oh my gosh!
So she was in. They took a picture of themselves.
Yeah.
Is that the people who took a picture of themselves?
There were like a group of like 3 of them or something. Yep, that's Kayla.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and she was like our first guest on this podcast, but yeah, she was there too, and the videos she shared like just blew me away. Like she said, because she's from coastal South Carolina, so when they got the flash flood warnings, she kind of wrote it off because when you live on the coast here, it's like, oh, flash flood warning, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal. We get them all the time. I got one yesterday randomly. Like, it happens. But who she was with was like, no, we need to go get the stuff from the Airbnb and go. Like, and so just, I think that just what you guys saw took such an emotional toll on you guys too. Like, that's just really hard. And that's, yes, your run was hard because of everything that went down. It had nothing to do with you as a runner.
I'm going with that.
So, and I'm glad that you were able to sort of talk that through with your coach a little bit and get that feedback, because I know there can be such a tendency when you like when I have a really crappy run, like this happened a couple weeks ago. I went out, it was like a 20-mile run, and I came back and it was like, damn, like that was like, it just took a lot. And I started a little bit like, what the hell? That was only 20 miles. Like I've got another 100 coming up. Like what? But then you have to sort of put that hand up and be like, stop right there. This is apples and oranges. Like, we try to apply meaning to things far beyond what is actually there.
Yeah, we do.
And that can be such a trap. And I think, like, for anyone, just being able to stop the thought process and recognize, like, no, this doesn't mean anything about how good I am, or like, am I able to run? Can I do something hard? Like, no, it's just like, today I am tired. X and Y and Z is going on. I'm dealing with, like you were dealing with a lot of emotional trauma, like deep stuff, shifting, pivot, like it all makes sense. It's just a day. Tomorrow's another day.
That's what I always tell my athletes who come to me and they're like, this run was just terrible. Like, it was awful. I say, what else is going on in your life right now?
Yeah.
Like, that's number one. Let's talk about what else has happened this week. Did you sleep well? Like, what other stressors? And there's usually something there. There's usually something, because stress is stress to the body. So running stress, or just emotional, mental stress, emotional stress, is just all, your body responds to it exactly the same. And so the more it's built up in you, the harder your runs are going to seem, because your body almost has been like working out constantly because of all the stress in your body. And that's just how it works. And so that's like the number one thing I always bring people back to is, well, what else has been going on?
Yeah.
And it's hard to do it myself. When I have a crappy run, I'm like, oh, that was awful. I shouldn't run ultras anymore because I'm a terrible runner. I can't remind myself of that. I'm really good at reminding other people of it.
Agreed.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you took the shift and found something else to run.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely was important. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for you. Like, I think it sounds like, you talk about some of the struggles and some of the things that are things that come up and that you need to be mindful of and be aware of, like not falling down the rabbit hole of thoughts, like we all do, but also like, wow, the mindset and the way that you can step back and look at things from a more objective kind of perspective, like, is really, really fantastic. And I don't know. I hope other people really take the time to listen to what we're talking about and like digest it, because I think it can be so impactful and helpful in running, but also just like dealing with life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, it's kind of like your podcast name, right? Let's run that again. One of the things I like about the name, and I'm not exactly sure 100% your motive behind it, but for me, when I hear and think in terms of something like "let's run that again," it's the idea that we should take the time to decompress or to rethink the experiences that we've had, good experiences, bad experiences, whatever they are, because I think we can learn so much from those that we can apply. Now, I am old, right? And that's part of what I do in life is I kind of reflect about everything, it seems to be these days. But I think I know that a lot of runners don't spend enough time reflecting on their experiences. They just move right to the next one.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of that, but I'm a bigger proponent of the process to get me to the next one and the steps that take me from goal race to goal race. That's the cream of the crop. Like that's the meat of everything is between the two goal races.
Yes.
So when we run that again, if you will, it's this experience of not negatively reflecting on it, but even like, again, if it's a DNF, you don't negatively reflect, you reflect. This is an experience I had. It did not go the way I wanted to go. And here's what I'd like to do next time that I am put in that situation when it's challenging again. And we run that experience over and over again. So I love kind of the branding that you've got with this podcast. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's very, very strong if we could convince ourselves to not be afraid to reflect of bad experiences as well as a good experience, because we also don't celebrate the good experiences very well, other than a social media post that we put out there. We celebrate it for like a couple of days. We don't reflect on what went well. Like,
right.
What did
and
go
what
well?
Could still go better. Yeah.
Correct. Right. And
even
so
if
we don't do that.
if it's a huge outward success,
right.
You get your A goal, you win the race, whatever it is. There's always, like, if you reflect on it, there's always something you can learn from. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the name of the podcast and kind of that intention.
That's good. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done, you as well. Then how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was actually listening to your recap of Cruel Jewel when Michelle was interviewing you.
Oh, wow.
And I had just DNF'd the Kettle Moraine 100K, and I was listening, and I was driving on a road trip up the East Coast with my family, and I was like, I think we just need to talk about DNFs more. And I was like, I've never ever wanted to host a podcast, but I think I want to do this. And so that's actually kind of full circle right now. You talking about the name.
That's so
that's
true.
where the first thoughts of this podcast came from.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad I could inspire you with a DNF.
And I didn't know that I had any interest either, but was always sort of fascinated by the DNF experience and how people process that, and not only how it happens, but just the process, the thought process, and moving forward, and understanding that, and being able to reflect. And so I did that episode with Jeff and Jeremy, talking about Cruel Jewel on the ultra running guys, and was sort of like doing my own processing of all that, and then Heidi and I ended up connecting, and like here we are.
Here we are.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot of reasons that people have podcasts, and I think when we can connect to what drives us into those, I think we have a lot of fun doing them. I think they become very successful because we believe in what they're about. And I think for you both, then that kind of speaks volumes for kind of where you're going to go with it. Same thing we did with the ultra running guys. It was all about trying to help people take their next step. The Blueprint podcast I'm going to be doing with Steve, we're focusing on helping people answer the question, do I have what it takes, and what does it take to actually do an ultra? And so we're going to help them get like basic tips and techniques and tools that they can add to their plans, but also to help them dig into the whole mindset side of it, because a lot of them, they don't believe that they can, but we believe in them. And so we know that it just takes them the work to do it. So we're going to be focusing a lot on mindset and tools and stuff and tips, if you will, that they can glean from the guest on our show. They can apply to their own blueprint, if you will, for what they're going to be doing. So, but again, in that nature, a podcast is driven based off the host and what they're passionate about. And so for you both, I think this works well. I think it's fantastic. And I applaud you for jumping into podcast world as well. I think it's fantastic that you're doing it. And I think it's going to bring so much to the community.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it. I'm having a blast with it.
That's good.
It's really cool. And it's nice to hear feedback like that too. And I know I've gotten like, you know, somebody screenshots a message they got from a friend that says, "Oh, thanks for sharing this podcast. I've been struggling with a DNF, and like it's so good to hear other people's like stories and like their mindsets through it." And so I mean that was the goal, you know.
That's awesome. Well done.
So,
congrats on that.
Thank you. I'm super excited to see the growth and transition and the journey of Blueprint to Ultra, because I think for exactly the reasons that you just talked about, I think it's going to be so impactful. And I just got excited thinking about like all the, like my favorite thing during a race is someone who's running an ultra for the very first time. That like new energy, that curiosity, and like, can I do this? Am I going to finish? What's going to happen? Like, and I think you guys, you and Steve tapping into that energy, and, you know, like Steve has that motto, you'll go further than you think, and it's going to be really, really exciting and fun to see that grow.
Well, I'm excited because it's going to be East Coast and West Coast, where when it was Jeremy and I were both East Coast, we're both Flatlanders. Well, now I can't use it as my excuse. Right?
There you go.
and that's the beauty of it, and it kind of opens up an entirely different conversation. And Steve brings to the table having, you know, run multiple 250s from the Coconut 250 side, and he's got that in his arsenal. And I think that's just a great kind of conversation piece, because as you both know, 200's like the new 100, right?
New 100.
Everybody wants to dance and talk about a 200,
So
and it's
true.
cool. But the person who's going to start running and getting into ultras, they're not trying to run a 200.
Yeah.
They're going to maybe get interested in it, but they're still thinking, I don't know how you run a 50K.
Right.
And what you and Heidi, what the three of us need to do is always pay attention to the fact that there are people that are still checking out the sport, and we can go run a 50K. And most of the time we feel like we're going to finish. Like, I have DNF to be a 50K too, but most of the time we feel pretty confident we'll finish a 50K. But there are people who don't. And our content that we produce should be helpful to that individual as well, not just to the 200 miler. And I think if you stay in tune with that, I want to grow the sport, and I want to bring people into it, and I want more people to just fall in love with ultras like I did. And you know, eventually, I'm going to probably be too old for this, but I want to be the old person who's out there running that everyone's like, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
You could probably say that now.
I think that's kind of
the very close in age, my friend.
Well, you don't look old. How about that?
I think that was kind of the goal here too, you know, is to make it so people don't fear failure. Because if you wait till you're ready to run 100 miles, no one's really ever ready to run 100 miles. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is just getting people to take the leap and try things and know that it might go south, but that's okay, because you can just do it again, and nobody cares. Nobody cares that you DNF'd. Like, nobody does. But you put all this pressure on yourself, and so I think that's part of it too, is to help bring people to the sport, to be like, look, we've got people from, I mean, gosh, we've interviewed, you know, people who are placing, you know, first woman at, you know, all the races they do, and they DNF too. And, you know, they have days where they're just not in it. And then we've got people who are back of the pack runners like me. And sometimes we make it and sometimes we don't. And it's about the learning and the growth that comes from it.
Yeah. That reflection, taking that time to really reflect and digest. And
but we run a fine line, right? Because the fine line is nobody does care. Like if you DNF, like I agree. Like most people in our circles around us are going to say, you ran 40 miles, 50 miles, whatever the number is, and you DNFs. I'm sorry. Like that's still very impressive. And we're going to tell them that.
Right.
But that individual, the DNF, they care.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that we want to do is we want to surround that person and respect the fact that that didn't go the way they wanted it to go. And you know what? It does suck. And it's okay to say it sucks when you DNF.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And yes,
those feelings are valid.
Right. Yeah. And so then the question is, don't feel like you can't do it. Let's figure out what you can do next time differently. And then kind of just encourage that way, because I know with some of the people I've talked to and even kind of coached, or even just on my own podcast, is I want to avoid making them feel like that it was good enough.
Right.
Like that's the fine line. It is the fine line, because it is good and it is impressive what they accomplished, but it wasn't good enough for their goal.
Right.
And that's the dance here, right? Because we don't want to sound discouraging, because it sounds a little negative, but it's not negative, because that individual is upset that they didn't get their goal. And it's okay to respect that and then help them say, you know what? That sucks. You didn't get your goal. Nobody else cares, true, because they don't, but you do.
But I know you care. Yeah.
Right. And because you care, I'm going to help you figure out what to do differently next time so that you can get that goal and accomplish your goal. Because that's the key. Because they wouldn't have signed up for that 50-mile race with the goal of 35 miles.
And it is interesting. You're so right that it's a funny dance, because we talk about this allowing grace and, you know, like, dude, I am right there. I'm the first one to tell you, give yourself some grace.
Same.
But you know what? I've got a friggin' fire inside that lights up like a mofo, and I will stand at that line. And I don't get up at 5 a.m. every day because I want to take it easy and do the easy button.
So we want to love them. We want to love them. We want them to give themselves grace, but we also want to not extinguish that fire.
Exactly.
Right. And
that's so beautiful. I love it.
But that's the because I remember when you interviewed us for the Cruel Jewel. I'm thinking, because I think you even said give yourself some grace, and I'm like, you're right. I need to give myself grace, because I can also turn the opposite side and just be too negative, which doesn't help. The grace for me is to accept what happened, but then what am I going to do about it?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the movement we want to take people. That's the let's run it again idea. If you help them understand that, then go do it again.
Yep.
You don't have to stay there. Just go do it again.
Yep.
So
I found the best cure for a DNF is just getting on Ultra Sign Up that night and signing up for something else. So that's my advice to anyone that DNFs.
Like our motto for this show, our slogan is stay curious and embrace the challenges.
That's
because that's what it's all about. It's like we were talking about the open mind, you know, like stay curious, have an open mind, and embrace the challenges. Like, let's go. Let's see what we can do.
I like that. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jeff, I am super excited to see not only the new podcast, but for you also, you got Canal Corridor coming up in less than a week.
Yes, I leave Thursday. Today is Sunday.
Yeah, and you know what? I think your mindset and your plan sounds like exactly what you need right now.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun, and that's the goal. The goal is to finish and have a blast. You're going to get that qualifier and
be miserable when I'm tired in the hotel cramping up.
Yeah.
But
and
it's
just
exciting.
Yeah, open mind, open heart.
Yep.
See what happens.
And when this episode comes out, Blueprint to Ultra will be out because it comes
great.
out the 18th. So
Awesome.
you can go ahead and listen to it,
Sweet.
everybody. So
Yay. And you've got kind of a stacked race calendar in the next few months, so lots of time to be curious and embrace challenges.
Yeah. I've got a 24-hour race on November 2nd, which is in 2 weeks after this one. So that was only going to be timed well after Yeti, but not timed well after this, but that's beside the point. And then I've got a 16-hour race on November 16th, and then I've got the long haul on January 21st or 20 something, sometime third week of January. I'll be doing a long haul 100 down in Florida.
Nice.
That's what's on the docket.
very cool.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to be excited to follow along.
Thank you. Follow your journeys as well.
And just real quick, your Instagram handle and your Blueprint to Ultra handle, if you could share that so that everybody can follow you. We'll put it in the show notes too. But
yeah, so Blueprint is blueprint_2 TO Blueprint _TO _ultra. And that's for the podcast. And we're still trying to grow that. So definitely give that a follow. And then my personal one, my Instagram is Winchester Jeff. So
Also, you are a coach, and you do have a coaching website as well.
oh
right?
yes,
jwultrarunning.com. So
we'll
I'll
put
do
that in
as
the
well.
show notes too.
So everybody check that out.
Yeah, thank you,
I'm
Jeff,
excited.
for
Thank
coming
you
on.
so much.
This was a
great.
really good conversation.
I appreciate you guys taking the time and humoring me with just asking me silly questions. Hopefully it gave your audience something that was helpful for them. But no, I do sincerely. I appreciate the invite. It was great conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you everybody for listening today. Be sure to give Jeff's Instagram and his new Blueprint to Ultra podcast a follow and a listen for sure. I'm excited for that to come out and listen myself. And we will see you guys next week. And in the meantime, just remember to stay curious and embrace the challenges. We appreciate your support so much. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tag us on our Instagram at Let's Run That Again and give us a shout out when you listen. And as always, we welcome feedback from you and are open to ideas and guests for future episodes. Reach out on our Instagram or email us at letsrunthatagainpod@gmail.com.